Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise this afternoon to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 891. As we discussed on Thursday when amendments were offered to try and improve this bill, Senate Bill 891 amends the Michigan Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Specifically, it amends Part 201 of that voluminous 1,000-page act. And within this section, within Part 201 of this act, are all of the rules that stipulate what kind of quality environmental cleanups we're going to require when polluters are leaving behind a mess in our pure Michigan. So in other words, Senate Bill 891 seeks to redefine how clean is clean when we're talking about an environmental cleanup. Senate Bill 891 certainly is going to, in many small ways, take us a step back from pure Michigan. Maybe we should call it not so pure Michigan. Because if we expect people to enjoy our beaches and swim in our waters without fear of encountering dangerous toxic chemicals, we need to require more stringent cleanups. And we've been backsliding in this regard for as long as I've been alive, really for the last 20 years. And I think all of you might remember a time, decades ago, when clean air and clean water were not partisan issues. We had great leaders in the state of Michigan, great Republican leaders, like former Governor Milliken, who felt that clean air, clean water, and clean land were important Michigan values, not partisan values. But over the course of the last decades, we've seen that bipartisan coalition to protect Michigan's environment fray at the edges, and now we're seeing it crumble right before our eyes. So once again, I would urge all of you, before you press the green button on Senate Bill 891, to think about what this bill is going to do. What it's going to do is, across the board, require less stringent cleanups of our polluted land. What it's going to do is it's going to allow polluters off the hook, allow polluters to leave more toxic contamination in our cities, in our parks, and in our aquifers. How does it do that? Well, for instance, current law has a preference for environmental cleanups that actually eliminate the source of the pollution. We have a preference in our law for cleanups that actually remove the pollution. This bill eliminates that preference, making it basically equal under the law to remove the pollution or to simply manage human exposure to the pollution. I submit to you that that is a mistake. It is a mistake because of the moral hazard of allowing polluters to get away with these environmental crimes and to not be held accountable. And it's also a mistake because it's going to leave that pollution in the ground, and it's going to mean that more people are exposed to these toxic pollutants, increasing their risk for cancer and other horrible diseases. Also, you may or may not know that current law allows polluters to walk away from polluted land and polluted aquifers. Under the current law, though, when the DEQ is going to allow a polluter to walk away without cleaning up their mess, they have to justify that. They have to put in words why it is we're allowing the polluter to walk away from their responsibility, foisting that responsibility onto the taxpayer and future property owners. We're eliminating that requirement that they justify that decision. We're also eliminating a requirement on the polluters that they provide a contaminated aquifer monitoring plan. So once again, we already have a law in the state of Michigan that allows polluters to walk away from their responsibility and leave toxic chemicals in the land and water. But the current law at least requires them to provide a plan for the ongoing monitoring of those toxic pollutants. This bill strips away that requirement. Finally, the only last thing I'll mention out of many problems with this bill is that the bill literally redefines what are residential and industrial lands in the state of Michigan and takes away protection for all of our recreational lands. Currently, if a polluter has polluted a land that's going to be used for recreational purposes, they have to clean up that land to residential standards. This bill would redefine what residential standards mean in Michigan so that it really only applies to areas that already have houses on them. This is going to leave our recreational lands that small children might be playing on, further polluted, and it's also going to make it more difficult to bring those lands back into development and back into productive use. You would think that in a state like Michigan, that has a long history with the Industrial Revolution and the polluted aftermath of abandoned factories and abandoned industrial sites, you would think that we would have a heightened concern about clean air and clean water. You would think that right here in the middle of the world's largest assemblage of fresh water, that pure Michigan would mean that we want to keep our state pure. But in fact, this bill takes us back. It rolls back pollutions for clean air, it rolls back pollutions for clean water, and it rolls back protections for public health. Now, to me, this is lamentable because, once again, it's just one more nail in the coffin of the bipartisan coalition that used to exist in Michigan to protect clean air and clean water. But it's also problematic because, once again, we're letting criminals off the hook. And I've seen time and time again when bills have come up in this legislature talking about street criminals or property crimes or assault of criminals. I've seen members of our law enforcement community, even our Attorney General, sending memos and getting very, very active to try to fight that kind of crime. Why is it that this legislature, and why is it that the executives in the Attorney General's office don't care about the corporate criminals that we are letting off the hook? We are letting off the hook for these corporate criminals who are refusing to even clean up their own mess, right? So why don't we get tough on crime for once in a big way? Why don't we get tough on the types of crimes that leave a lasting legacy of pollution in our communities? Why don't we get tough on crime and vote no on Senate Bill 891? Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, on the question of final passage of Senate Bill 891, there are 56 aye votes and 52 nay votes.
Majority of the members elected and serving have voted therefore the bill is passed.